Hello, and welcome to Konichi Value. I'm Ray Saito, and today I'm trying something new. I know the video is a bit choppy, but bear with me, because I think this message is very important. Because today, I'm talking about housing. And not just any housing, but social housing, which is in Japan called UR, or Urban Renaissance. And the reason why I'm talking about this today is because for many months, after scouring Twitter, TikTok, or YouTube, there really seems to be a huge housing issues, especially for people in my age, our millennials, and Gen Z too. And this especially is true in the West, where, in places like Canada, New York, most of America to be honest, the UK and Sweden, my own country, most of us can no longer afford a place to buy. And many of us can't even afford a place to rent that's not in the middle of nowhere. And to me that is crazy, because I lived in Tokyo for quite a long while now, and here we just don't talk about that issue. We just don't talk about people not being able to afford a place to rent or even a place to buy. Most of us, middle income or upper income or even lower middle income people, can afford a place to rent in the middle of Tokyo. And there's many reasons for this, which I will link to a video I have here actually. But one of the reasons is UR, or Japanese style social housing. So what is UR? Well, let me back to the beginning. Because UR actually started after the World War II, when basically all of Tokyo was bombed to smithereens. There was nothing standing in Tokyo after the war. And there was a desperate need for housing. So the government collaborated with different developers to start the Japan Housing Corporation. And this, that later became Urban Renaissance, or UR, had a mission to build as many houses as quickly as possible, which they did. And many of these places you can still see today, these massive concrete communist style slabs that are just huge and can house thousands of people. But together with the private markets, the Japanese government was so successful at building houses that just 10 to 20 years after the war, everybody that wanted to be housed was basically housed. And that's when UR started to rebrand themselves. Instead of focusing on just building a lot of houses for cheap, they actually started thinking about community and thinking about places to live. They started renovating these old concrete blocks, and they started building houses that were attractive, not just to low-income people, but to anyone looking for houses. And I find that super interesting, because today, for most people, UR is an attractive place which most people can live in if they want to. Think about this, and then think about social housing where you come from. In most places, social housing is something people look down upon. Usually, it's these giant concrete slabs far away from the city that are almost like city ghettos where poor people live, first-generation immigrants, etc. And there's just a lot of crime and a lot of disillusion and a lot of unhappiness. And this is not the case about UR. And so if you look at if this UR model might be able to be replicated outside of Japan, I do think it can in many ways. For example, just because it's run by the government doesn't mean you can't have a focus on well-being. That's something that I think is very easy to shift just to house people to actually make things livable. And in Japan, anybody can get social housing. It's just that, for example, if you are a middle income or upper middle income person, you just have to pay the base rent. You don't get any subsidies. And that means that people from UR, living in UR, are not only lower income class people. It's actually a plethora of people all mixed together which create a much more vibrant and equitable community. The one thing though that I think Tokyo and Japan has that most of the world doesn't, especially the Western hemisphere here, is the zoning laws. Not to get into too much detail, but in Japan, there's basically 12 zones, and you can build almost any type of housing almost anywhere without people protesting and without things being shut down. And you just don't have that in, let's say, Canada, the US, or Sweden, where I come from. In most of those countries, you have powerful NIMBY organizations that do anything to protect their property value. So even if there's a huge slab of land that nobody's using in the middle of the city, these NIMBYs will do anything to protect it from social housing being built. And I do think that needs to change for UR to be able to flourish in other countries, or at least the same model. But so why do I think UR is such a game changer, and especially for foreigners who want to live in Tokyo and Japan in general? Well, as you may know, if you try to live in Japan or live here now, it's really hard for foreigners to get apartments. There's a lot of discrimination because also the Japanese government, there's no good system to keep track of foreigners. So people are very afraid that foreigners will just leave the country as soon as they get their apartment. And all those things can be avoided. All this discrimination can be avoided if you go through UR. Because UR has a policy to not discriminate against anyone, no matter where you're from and who you are, or even if you're in debt. As long as you can show that you can pay your rent, you are eligible for UR housing. Two other benefits are that they're transparent, as I said, and they have a no fee structure. So you don't pay for, key money as you do for a lot of other places, or, like real estate agent fees, etc. It's just the deposit. So they know you can't just flee away from the house if you can't afford it. That's it. Also, it's really good if you're a parent, or if you're young and married, or if you're a caretaker to one of your parents. Because UR does give huge subsidies to people that are unprivileged in society, so that they also have a chance to afford your houses. And to top it off, UR is actually partnering with companies like Muji and IKEA to build really nice apartments. If you ever live in a UR place that's really old but has been renovated, I can assure you that it looks just as nice as a completely new apartment in Tokyo. As you can hear, I truly recommend UR for anyone wanting to live in Tokyo, and Japan in general. They have houses literally everywhere. But do be aware that the best places are always taken. So whenever they're on the market, you have to be really, really quick. And just to end this, I wanted to show you some apartments you can actually get right now as I'm speaking. They might be taken when this video gets uploaded, but just to give you an idea of how good UR can actually be. So what really shocked me is that in a station called Meguro, Nakameguro, there's a massive tower that looks kind of like a cigarette. And that tower, half of it is owned by UR. And you can actually move in there. There's an apartment open right now for around 200,000 yen a month, which is not cheap, but for a tower mansion in Japan, that is a crazy good deal. If you're willing to live a little bit outside, like in Kyoto, Setagaya, you can find places for around 130,000 yen, 150,000 yen that are 50 to 60 square meters big, relatively new and usually well renovated. This is just a sample of the kind of places you can find in UR. And also, because you don't pay any key money or any real estate agent fees, even if they are a bit more expensive than some place you might find, you have to factor those things in. And with that, I just want to say happy hunting. And I hope that you can take away from this video that UR is something I would wish to see in other countries. And I think that it can really ease the burden of the housing market so that people can afford to live near cities where they work, where they play, and where they hang out. And until that happens, I think the housing crisis in Europe and the US is just gonna get worse. So, I don't know. If you don't see an end to it, maybe it's time to come to Japan, where you can truly enjoy cheaper and better housing. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.